Hi, welcome to the next video of the series where I talk about the theory of teaching and methodology. In the first videos, I focused on what a good lesson is and how you can pick goals for each lesson and for lesson plans and training cycles. And now I would like to focus on how to implement these things in an actual lesson. First, we're going to focus on the first part of each lesson, which is the warm-up and lead-in. I think that there is a quite significant difference between the two, and I will explain why I think it is very important to make that difference. You have picked a goal for your training cycle, you've picked a goal for your lessons, and now it's time to actually work towards that goal in each lesson. So from the very beginning of the lesson to the end of the lesson, everything should be kind of geared towards the goal of the lesson and the goal of the training cycle. Of course, there are some lessons where you do it, where you focus on having more fun and testing things. But if it's a lesson in the middle or at the beginning of a training cycle that deals with learning new things, skills or knowledge, or developing skills, improving on something, then this should be something where you need a good lead-in towards drilling phase to then actually implement and test it in live rolling and sparring. So we're at the very beginning of lesson where we have a warm-up, which I will briefly address, and then we have a lead-in. This is the first phase that actually prepares your students for what is coming in that lesson, so what they are supposed to do in the lesson, and you're setting the goal for them, or they are setting their goals for themselves, depending on how you approach it. And then you do the drilling, the sparring, and all the other things that make our sport so much fun. First of all, warm-ups are necessary. You should do them, but you should not do them randomly. Often one can see warm-up drills that do not really make sense, especially for advanced students. And that's why purple belts are often late for class, and because they do not see any value in shrimping, rolling, and doing all the fundamental movements if they are already quite capable of them. So if you do this, it does not really serve them, and they do not really learn anything in that time. So there is no progression, but everything should help them progress. Therefore, you need a good warm-up that makes sense. And if you do these high intensity conditioning style warm-ups, usually it's also very difficult to set goals in that group environment that can be achieved on the individual level. So I would, well, in my lessons, I don't do this. If they want to get physically fit, they should do that in a gym with lifting weights, working on their cardio by running, biking, swimming. And if they want to, they can also go the Marcelo Garcia way and do their cardio by simply, and their conditioning by simply rolling. Nonetheless, it's often wasted time, this cardio and this warm-up section of a lesson. So I like to keep it short, maximum of 10 minutes, just to do the following. It's general physical preparedness for that lesson. So get people mentally ready, like a ritual at the beginning of a competition. You want people to be able to leave work, come to you, get dressed for the lesson, and then you do some warm-ups to actually get them mentally ready for the task that is at hand, to have fun, to learn something new in your BJJ class. So there should be some ritual that prepares them mentally for, okay, now I'm going to do jiu-jitsu or grappling in general. Next, it should prepare them physically, like raised body temperature, raising the heart rate, lubricating joints, all these things that help us to prevent injuries. And in the end, it's also something that you do to enhance your performance, like you do with your rituals and your warm-ups for competition, so that everything is nice and loose and you can actually start doing what you're supposed to do, and that's grappling and not lunges, squats, push-ups and all that. If people, especially beginners, struggle with basic human movement, then yes, it makes absolutely sense to focus a little bit more time on that, especially when you have beginners who haven't done much sports in the last decade or so. Yes, they need the shrimping, rolling around and all that to actually be prepared to do what we want them to do. But they don't need to do it each and every class. One should then try to use specific warm-up exercises that lead in towards what you're going to do with them anyways. Like if you're going to do the bridge and roll escape from mount, then you should do some bridging, of course. If you're going to do some takedowns, break fall, technical stand-up, and maybe rolling backwards, good idea to include in the warm-up. Yes, and this is already kind of leading us into the lead-in. When you do specific warm-up, specific warm-up for your class, it's already the first part of the lead-in. A lead-in is not only getting people physically ready to do some kind of sports, but it should get them mentally ready to actually start thinking about the elements of the sport that you are going to talk about in that lesson. So they are going to be prepared and motivated to work on that. You should introduce the topic to them, which should make them curious about what's going to come. You should show them why it is important to them, why this topic is something that they should actually address, and you should tell them what the goals of the lesson are at the beginning. You don't have to stand in front of the class and talk about it. You can do that by implementing some easy drills, games, maybe some flow or slow rolling with certain restrictions to help them get into the topic of that day. By doing that, you can help them to activate knowledge that they already have of the topic that you're going to talk about. You can give some context, how you get into the position or what to expect in the position, how to get out of the position, where it is in general when you're grappling. It helps you to show why you're doing this at this moment, because you know what you have done before, you know what you're going to do in that lesson, and you know what you are going to do in the next lesson, so you can tell them why it fits into the training cycle that you prepared for that specific topic. So you connect the different lessons to each other by using the lead-in, and it's again a specific warm-up. And one of the most important aspects, people can actually start asking questions or forming questions in their head, which they then can ask later. So in general, when I do this lead-in phase of class, I try to get people into the position that they are going to work in anyways. So if we are going to do some inverted stuff, I will try to put them into some inversions in one way or the other to simply get warmed up in this specific movement so that there is less risk of injury. By putting them into this position, they also can try to figure out what they can do, which ways they can move and which ways they cannot move in the position, and they can try to figure out if they know something in that position already or not. Maybe they can revisit techniques and concepts that we have already covered in other training cycles, maybe a couple of months ago, or they can revisit techniques and concepts that have already been covered in the lessons prior to that lesson in the training cycle that we're running at that moment. Maybe they are advanced students and they simply have some new ideas. They watched some YouTube videos with techniques and concepts that they would like to play around with. Then that's exactly the best place and time to do that, especially when you already told them about what the goal of the lesson is. Then advanced students should be able to think about whether or not their research at home fits what is going on to be the goal of the lesson or not. And maybe you are also an advanced coach or teacher, then you have certain ways where you can let advanced students play a bit more, experiment, and do something different while you are teaching the class maybe on another topic. Lead in that when people revisit techniques and concepts that you've covered before, you as a coach, instructor, teacher can help people either by actually correcting what they are doing, or they can get some feedback on how they are doing from partners that they have not been working with the last lesson. Sometimes people miss a lesson, so then they come in and they don't know what was done in the last lesson, so they can catch up by simply either you telling them what they should do, or by somebody else from the group teaching them what you covered in the last lesson. And again, most importantly, if things don't work out, they will actually start to have questions, which is the best thing that can happen to you. I will probably do a video on why questions are great and how you can deal with them, especially at the beginning of your teaching or coaching career. Questions can be quite intimidating as they kind of put you on the spot, but you can always deal with them in a way that it is so that you get more time to think about before you give your answer. And often your answer is not necessarily what the people really want. They just want you to show them a way how they can answer the questions themselves. So that's the difference between a lead-in and a warm-up. For me, the lead-in should already apply all the principles, or we should already apply all the principles of a good lesson in the lead-in. By doing that, you can help people focus on a specific topic in a specific lesson, help them to get some structure and arranging things in their head so that they know where they are at in the training cycle and why they are doing things. And by doing kind of an open lead-in, you can also help them develop their own questions, which then can lead to a better learning experience for them. In the next video, I will talk about how you should then progress in a lesson by looking at different aspects that we can use to modulate and regulate what's going on in a lesson. Before then, talking about drills, games, and sparring, and how we can use the different ideas of games, drills, sparring to actually do this progressive drilling and progression within a lesson. So see you next time.